Now, the stock market finished the week at an all-time high following a mild inflation report. The Dow gaining 472 points and closed above 47,000 for the first time ever. And for more on this report, we're joined by Martha Gimbel, the executive director and co-founder of the Yale Budget Lab. Martha, thank you so much for hanging out with us on a Friday night. And listen, as we mentioned, inflation is still up, but not as much as economists predicted. So, help us make sense of this number of these numbers. I mean, what should people really kind of take away from this?
So on the one hand, it could be worse. On the other hand, we would like it to be much, much better. If you look at the year-over-year inflation numbers, as you said, it came in about 3%. We're aiming for a little over 2% here. So it's substantially above where the Federal Reserve wants it to be. And frankly, it's substantially above what, we were all used to before the pandemic. And so, if you're going to the grocery store, if you're trying to provide for your family and you keep thinking, wow, these prices seem really high. Yeah, we're all on the same page.
Well, and of course, this comes as President Trump implements new tariffs. How much do you think those tariffs impacted these numbers?
Yeah, the tariffs are playing a role here. We can look at categories of goods that are affected, and they're up more than we would have expected them to be before the tariffs were put in place. You mentioned coffee earlier. Coffee is a great example of something that is tariffed and that we can't really provide here in the United States. And so tariffs on coffee mean that we're all going to be paying a lot more for coffee, which I, for one, struggle with as a caffeine addict.
Yeah, you and me both.
But I think the thing that we all need to keep in mind is that we have not yet felt the full impact of the tariffs. They get phased in over time. And so it is not simply the case that any price increases that we've seen fully bake in all of the tariffs. Economists are agreed there are more price increases to come.
Yeah. Well, President Trump is traveling to Asia, where he's expected to engage in trade talks with China's President Xi Jinping. Meanwhile, last night, he canceled trade talks with Canada over that anti-tariff television ad. I'm curious, how much of an impact could these negotiations or canceled talks have on inflation going forward?
Yeah, the canceled negotiations with Canada don't really have that much of an immediate impact. There's nothing that's going on there that's going to make a difference immediately. With China, there's been a bunch of back and forth. On the one hand, he said that he's going to stand strong. On the other hand, just a few days ago, he told us all not to worry about it and it will all be okay. So we'll have to see where we land. But I think the fact that I don't have a clear answer for you on this is part of the problem. It is very difficult for businesses to respond to this environment when they don't know what tariffs they're going to be facing tomorrow, much less next week or the month or next year. And so that's really, really hard for businesses to figure out how to optimize their supply chains and get goods to Americans in the most cost-effective way possible.
Well, and I recognize this could be broad, but aside from tariffs and negotiations, what other factors do you see as possibly influencing prices in the coming months?
One thing you're going to see is, with the Federal Reserve looking to cut interest rates, they're trying to support a weakening labor market, but it's also possible that inflation takes off again. So we'll have to see how that goes. Would be remiss not to mention immigration. Immigration makes a huge difference in the cost of goods, particularly for things like care. If you're trying to find childcare or elder care, those are sectors that are really dependent on immigrants. Costs in the construction industry. And so, we will see how those sectors respond in the months to come as fewer and fewer immigrants come to the United States.
All right, Martha Gimbel, thank you for your time.